Shadow of the Colossus is, at its heart, a game all about the problematic nature of the relationship between the individual and religion. Specifically, it delves into the unhappy struggle of the man who finds his own sense of right and wrong to be in conflict with the demands of his society and its beliefs. The game presents a war between new religion and old religion, and the player, via the protagonist, Wander, becomes caught in the middle, and ultimately becomes another casualty of a conflict that is not his own. Because the player experiences the game primarily through a limited third-person observation of the adventures of Wander, it is tempting to think that the great conflict is the one between Wander and death. In reality, this isn't the case, and Wander's perspective is really only a brief glimpse that the player gets of a much longer struggle. It's important to note here that Dorman and Lord Emon are both identified by name in the course of the game's cutscenes. This is a big deal for a game that gives little exposition and fails to name even the player-controlled character. The fact that Wander's name isn't used by any other character in the game might be easily dismissed if the player were given a first-person view or if Wander were some silent protagonist. But he's not. He has some very unique character traits, and he makes his motivations pretty clear in the beginning of the game. We're not meant to pour our character traits into him to identify. Rather, the identification comes from a sympathy that we have for his suffering and a desire we have to help him on his journey. We experience his powerlessness in our own lives, and so we seek to help him conquer his own by beating death itself. The unfortunate truth is that Wander is not very significant in the grand scheme of things, no matter how much we wish he were. I know what you're thinking. But he kills powerful, gigantic beasts. He defies his society by running off to a forbidden land, and he awakens a dark god and releases it from its prison. This is all true, and the way that he accomplishes it can't be ignored. This is not some sort of over-muscled superhuman. He's required to use his brain to defeat these enormous colossi. He, like the common man, does not come into this world with all sorts of advantages, and he has to use what resources he has to get ahead. Despite all of his intelligence, however, he becomes a tool in the war between forces much greater than himself without even realizing it. This is not due to his ignorance or emotional blindness because of the death of Mono. It's simply because his name means little in the shadow of the colossal figures of Lord Emon and Dorman. As I said earlier, his name isn't even mentioned in the cutscenes. In fact, the only place I could find Wander's name in-game was in the Japanese title. We'll go a little bit deeper into the title of the game later, but suffice to say that despite this and his seemingly great accomplishments, including the revival of a dead woman, Wander is primarily the pawn of an ancient god in his revenge against a religious official. We want his deeds to mean something, but his deeds and accomplishments are ultimately small in comparison with the machinations of a god and the power of the church. In a world of larger-than-life public figures and massive global problems that we feel powerless to overcome, we identify with Wander's insignificance, and thus we wish to make him significant. What precisely, then, is the nature of the conflict that seems so much greater than the individual? Well, taking a look at some of the aesthetic choices for the setting of the game gives us a pretty good idea. Throughout the landscape of the Forbidden Lands, we see ruins that bear markings with pretty close resemblance to those on the clothing of Wander and Lord Emon, as well as to the major sigils of the Colossi. As the clothing and the Colossi were both created by Wander and Lord Emon's culture, we can then presume that the architecture of the Forbidden Lands was produced by their ancestors. Wander's people once occupied these Forbidden Lands. This can be further proven by looking at the Japanese names for the Forbidden Lands, one of which roughly translates to Land of the Ancient Times. Obviously, some ancestors called these lands home, and they're responsible for the buildings we see. But what does this tell us about the nature of the conflict between Lord Emon and Dorman? A quick look at the evidence suggests that, at one time, Wander's people worshipped Dorman as their god, and they ultimately betrayed him. Let's take a look for a moment at the Shrine of Worship. This is the primary location at which Wander communicates with Dorman, aside from some in-battle hints while he's fighting the Colossi. It's also the location of the statues of the 16 Colossi representing the 16 parts of Dorman. These lead you to believe that the Shrine of Worship was, in fact, used to worship Dorman at some point. More compelling evidence comes, however, when you take a look at the exterior of the shrine. It is enormous. It seems to climb all the way to the heavens. In fact, it seems rather reminiscent of a tower from a certain Western religious tradition. Like the creators of the Tower of Babel, Wander's ancestors seem to have attempted to build a tower with its top in the heavens. Like those who built the Tower of Babel, these ancestors of Wander probably aroused the fear of a god. In the story of Babel, God worries that the tower may be only the beginning of what the people will do, and that, as one people, nothing they propose to do will be impossible for them. In the case of Wander's people, this worry became the reality, as they successfully defeated a god by severing him into 16 parts. So it seems less that Dorman was some great evil that they sealed away, than that he was a god who had to be conquered in order for humans to attain a godlike power. This seems appropriate, given that power struggles are really the foundation of the game. From all the evidence mounted thus far, I'm led to a single conclusion. The entire plot is the result of a power struggle in which Wander has become involved without even realizing it. This power struggle, though, is not the one between Lord Emon and Dorman. It is a battle between religion and society. The fear of losing power seems to be at the forefront of Lord Emon's mind. It's true that he fears Dorman's ability to control beings created from the light, but his real fear is human, not supernatural. Any leader fears the loss of power, but a religious leader in a society where a god itself has been defeated must be in an especially precarious position. Lord Emon himself hints at this when he states in the game's prologue that in the Forbidden Lands, it is said that if one should wish it, one can bring back the souls of the dead, but to trespass on that land is strictly forbidden. He and those in power have codified into their religion a taboo against returning to this place of power, and there is even in place some kind of magic which prevents any who go to the Forbidden Lands from returning. Any, that is, except for Lord Emon and his followers, who leave with ease at the end of the game. What other reason might there be, except to prevent one with a power over death from returning to take control from the existing authority? For Lord Emon and those like him also exercise power over death itself in the form of ritual sacrifice, in the name of destroying those with a quote-unquote cursed fate. It seems that what they really fear here is not the return of Dorman, nor even Wander himself. Wander, as he is in the game, is insignificant, but what he represents is a potential for an upset in the power structure. The leader of the religion fears that the members of his society may be able to overthrow him if they attain the power that lay in the Forbidden Lands. This is where I believe the title of the game becomes significant. In English, the title Shadow of the Colossus has always perplexed me because of the use of the singular. After all, there's more than one Colossus, and by the end, there's a hell of a lot of shadows. I think the title's a little more symbolic than it might seem at first. I think here, the Colossus represents those in power, or perhaps even Lord Emon himself, who is a hulking giant in whose shadow Wander must stand. This becomes more interesting with the Japanese title, which could translate to either Wander in the Colossus, or Wander in the Colossi. I can't help but wonder if maybe both meanings are intended here. There is a bit of subtlety that gets lost in translation and seems to imply that, while it initially appears that the Colossi are the antagonists, the reveal at the end shows who the powerful, destructive monster really is. So there we have it. I may have been a little misleading earlier when I declared that Wander was insignificant. Although he ultimately does little to upset the power balance of his society, what he represents engenders enough fear in the leaders of his religion to warrant their swift action. In this way, he provides a sort of pessimistic hope for the individual. The message that this story leaves us with is that the individual can gain real power, but that those who already have power will jealously guard it, and they will go to great lengths to keep it. This story of a man who defies his own religion due to his sense of good and evil may have a bittersweet ending, but it leaves us with the message that it is at least possible for the insignificant individual to challenge the wrongdoings of his own society. Thanks everyone for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe. I know you hear that on every other YouTube channel. There's a reason we say it. It helps us a lot, especially comment. For this channel, that's just particularly important because, I mean, we're trying to analyze here, and I know that there are pieces of evidence I missed. I know there's evidence that can be interpreted other ways. I know that there are all kinds of interpretations that are going to fly in the face of what I just said. And that's perfect. This is the forum for it, honestly. I love the idea of discussions where we really get to the heart of these things. And if you can prove me wrong, please do. And if there are some other things you want to look at, go for it. Other than that, next week, we're going to go ahead and take another look at Shadow of the Colossus. This time I'm going to take a close look at aggro and mono. And if you haven't checked out the introductory video that I did on the channel, go ahead and give that a look if you're confused about what exactly it is that I'm trying to accomplish here, what we're doing. It sort of gets at what I'm hoping to do with this channel. So go ahead and click on that, and see y'all next week.